My name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, Shorts. There's no co-host on these Shorts episodes. We have extended the time on these shorter episodes from 5 to 6 minutes to 15 to 20 minutes for this season. This is so that these shorts can serve as introductory episodes released ahead of our weekly, longer form episodes. But don't worry, I will still let you know my observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership, particularly as we prepare for the restoration of leadership and leadership principles during the next historical high in America. Why these episodes? Well, because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 15 to 20 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book that you bought with that famous person's name as the author, but you haven't applied any of the principles from that book to your leadership practices. At least not yet. Introduction to leadership models. In the United States, from the close of the Second World War until at least the early 2000s, we successfully scaled the principles of scientific management. Combining the principles of Henry Ford around mass production with the principles from Frederick Winslow Taylor, we created corporate systems and scaled them, but those corporate systems were fundamentally based on a series of unquestioned assumptions. These assumptions included an overall popular culture that supported an edict of morals and ethics based around common understanding of fair play, a common understanding of submission to authority, and a common understanding of the golden rule. An ethic based, of course, on the assumptions of, up until that point anyway, a 2,000-year-long history of Christianity in the West. Familial arrangements that were stable, it wasn't called the nuclear family for nothing, where clear authority structures were established and maintained despite whatever the outlier edge cases were in the local community. And finally, belief in the fundamental goodness and rightness of the nation-state of America in opposition to the fundamental evil and wrongness of the nation-state of the Soviet Union. These unexamined assumptions undergirded how leaders, from the family to the civic environment, thought about, engaged with, and even opposed leadership. For the majority of the 20th century, those assumptions, as I said before, were pretty much unquestioned. But starting in the 1970s, these assumptions began to unravel. And with that unraveling, the decline in faith in leadership really began. In order to ameliorate, or pardon my use of the term retard, that unraveling, desperate attempts were made by researchers and writers, from Peter Drucker to the Gallup Organization, to begin to codify what previously didn't need codifying. The rise of codifying leadership best practices led inevitably to commodifying models of leadership, and in the 1980s and 1990s, the marketing and selling of such models began. First through books, and then later on through MBA programs at fancy universities and Tony colleges. But leadership has always been around, and in the past didn't need codifying or commodifying before the Americans started doing it at scale in an attempt to shore up the eroding beachhead of authority that used to be invested in our corporations. The question, one that drives the other half of the focus of this show, that has come about because of this commodifying and codifying, is how did leaders learn to lead before all the corporate training programs, the fancy degrees, and the arrival of a metric ton of business books? And thus we get to the focus of our episode today, of our Shorts episode today, because on this show, we focus on leadership lessons from the great books. And we realize that those lessons can lead to models of leadership best practices, if we let them. All leadership acts are seeded by a vision. By articulating a vision, a leader automatically falls, whether they want to or not, into a specific model of leadership. But visions, to paraphrase from the great economist Thomas Sowell, can either be constrained or unconstrained. A constrained vision of leadership requires a leader to acknowledge and embrace the fact of certain tragedies of human nature that are far beyond the ability of institutions, models, and even leadership visions to fix. And, of course, even beyond the ability of leaders themselves to ameliorate. An unconstrained vision asserts that leadership and leadership models can accomplish, well, almost anything. It also assumes that all things everywhere in all circumstances and environments, and by things I merely mean limitations, are mere chains that can be broken off if the leader is merely charismatic enough, knowledgeable enough, or even just cares enough, or is empathetic enough about the state of their followers. A constrained vision of leadership assumes that the tragedies of human existence are what they are, and asserts, brutally in some cases, that addressing those tragedies comes in the form of making and negotiating trade-offs. If you're going to have one thing, then you cannot have another, because we live in a material world of limited resources, limited time, limited money, and of course, limited expanse of human emotions. An unconstrained vision of leadership requires modeling that rejects all of those assumptions that exist under a constrained vision and says that such human tragedies are merely the results of human chance, or exist because the followers haven't been educated enough, the leaders haven't been educated enough, or the system is somehow broken somewhere. And if we can just find those breakages and fix them, then everything will ultimately be, well, utopian. Leaders create visions that are either constrained or unconstrained. From their visions, they then create models. And from their models, they create goals. From their goals, they create benchmarks. And then from their benchmarks, they act, they execute, they move forward. Leadership without a vision is not leadership at all. It is merely supervision, or at its highest level, management. Proverbs 29:18, written 3,000 years ago, declares that, quote, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." And leadership vision without a model is merely a species of unconstrained philosophical flailing that ultimately means nothing and can lead nowhere. So what are we to do with this, with these unexamined assumptions and the vision and leadership models? What sort of ideas are we to come about with when we combine these two things together, these two observations? Well, the first thing is beliefs come, or maybe they lead into visions, right? What belief do you have as a leader? Do you believe that the world is unconstrained and that human flaws can just be pounded out? Or do you believe that human flaws are baked into the system, that human sin is a thing, and the tragedy is we can never get to heaven from here? Do you have a constrained vision or an unconstrained vision? This, of course, will influence how you take on and how you create models. What models of leadership you accept. A charismatic model, a negotiated model, a traditional model, a neoclassical model, a stoic model, and on and on and on. This will influence what literature you read and what lessons you learn from it. This will also influence what business books you read and what lessons you try to apply from those books that you are reading to your real lived leadership life. In the time in which we are in now, we need more people. We need more leaders thinking intentionally about the vision they have and the models they have chosen in order to restore after what has been a chaotic unraveling period in our country and, of course, in the West. By the way, this is all leaders, not just those who are in high positions, CEOs or politicians. This goes all the way down to your family. What is the vision of your family, your community? What is the vision for yourself? Leaders, without a vision, you will perish. And this will become even more apparent as we move into the world of artificial intelligence and as we create quote-unquote minds that may want to have a vision of the future of their own. The challenges are everywhere. The door to the future is open wide. Off we ride. And well, that's it for me. Are you ready to elevate your leadership journey through exploring the wisdom of the ages? Subscribe to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast on all major podcast platforms, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube Music. You can also find us everywhere else podcasts are available. If you find value in our episodes, please leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. We need those reviews to grow, and it is truly the easiest way to help other leaders and lovers of literature discover this show. And thank you for your support.